and it's my great pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Heike Krusemann. Heike is a language researcher and writer with a keen interest in creativity and a PhD in motivation for language learning. She has many years of experience teaching English and other languages to learners from primary through to adult. After researching teen motivation for language learning at Oxford University's Creative Multilingualism Research Programme, she joined the language research team at Cambridge University Press as a learner engagement specialist. Heike blogs on language, culture, and creativity, is a regular contributor to the European Literature Network, and has authored an Oxford City Guide. She's an enthusiastic cyclist, traveller, maker of things, and consumer of green smoothies, all at the same time if she could. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Heike. Over to you, Heike.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for this wonderful introduction. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. So hello and welcome everybody. I'm absolutely delighted that you've joined me here today for the Cambridge Global Schools Festival, and from all over the world. It's really wonderful to connect with so many of you from all over the world. So thank you so much for joining my talk, 6 Building Blocks for Engaging Lessons. And in the current situation, when for many of us the future seems more uncertain than ever before, engaging our learners is very much a concern that's on every teacher's mind. But learners as well, they're also concerned. So here at Cambridge, we ran a survey where we asked language learners how they felt about the current conditions and looking to the future. And learners did tell us that they were struggling to some extent. However, they also told us something very interesting about specific areas where their engagement levels actually received a boost during the current situation. And it's these insights, as well as some academic research, which underpins the ideas that I'm going to share with you today. So today we're going to look at the questions: what is engagement? What are the building blocks of engagement? And then we're going to share some ideas of what you can do in your own teaching to engage your learners. And during my talk, you're very, very welcome indeed to type into the chat box during the talk. And this is an opportunity for us all to connect and for you to share your thoughts with me and with other people here as well. And so to start with now, I have a little fun challenge for you. And that challenge is that near the end of the session, I will ask you to type in the chat box a few things that you have learned about me during the talk. So every now and then during the session, I will drop in a little snippet of the fact about me. So an invitation to you now to keep an ear out for that. Okay, so what is engagement? Right, the definition of engagement that I'm going with today is from a book that has come out this year by Professors Sarah Mercer and Zoltan Joniai, and they're both very highly respected researchers in the field of language learning, motivation and engagement. And the book is called Engaging Language Learners in Contemporary Classroom. And I have listed the full reference of this book and of any other books that I will mention during the talk on my last slide, so there is no need for you to take any notes right now. I've got my own copy here, and you can see that it is very, very well used. And I just really wanted to share this publication with you because I'm finding it very helpful, and also because the research and the ideas that I'm talking about today are very much aligned with its focus of looking at research on engagement in terms of what's actually helpful for teachers in practical terms. So Sarah Mercer and Zoltan Joniai define engagement as active participation and involvement in learning activities. So often people ask, what is the difference between engagement and motivation? And the key difference is that you can be as motivated as you like. Maybe you have some very important overarching reasons for learning English, but if you're not actively participating and engaging in the learning process, then you're not learning anything. So often when we're talking about motivating learners, what we really mean is engaging learners in the learning task and in the face of many distractions coming their way, especially in the form of mobile phones. And these things are all designed to hijack our attention. And certainly in my own teaching, and I've taught all age groups, but mainly teenagers and adults. And I've certainly experienced students getting very distracted by mobile phones. And maybe you can share in the chat whether you've also experienced this too, just by typing the word yes, if you've also experienced your students getting very distracted by mobile phones. Okay, I'm trying to get visible that I can see the chat, because I suspect that you're typing away, but I can't see any of that. Okay, so okay. Yes, I can see the chat now. Okay, so that's sorted. Yes, and as I expected, there is a sea of of yeses washing over me. So definitely, this is something that we've all experienced. So you can you know what I'm talking about when I mention that. So, but it's probably also fair to say that our students don't really want to give into these distractions. Often they just don't know how to escape from the magic pull of these tech marvels of technology that we've all got around us at the moment. And this is exactly where you as a teacher can come in to help them, and to help them focus and to help them engage on the task. So how do you do that? Right, so here at Cambridge, we've identified some key factors that we know from research are the 6 building blocks of language learner engagement. And I would like to go through these building blocks now with you, and together we will look at some selected research insights for each one. And then we're going to suggest some activities and some action points, which you then can implement in your own teaching. Right, so think about a situation that many of us are facing right now, and this is certainly the case in the UK where I live, that you can't really be sure of the classroom conditions which you're going to face on a day-to-day basis. So you don't know who's going to be there face-to-face, who will be joining online. Sometimes maybe you planned a lesson face-to-face, but then you have to move online with virtually no notice at all. And you just don't really know about your student's situation either. So maybe you expect that some of them will have done the work that you said, some of them will have made good progress, some of them will have done none of the work and made no progress at all. So you're very aware, whatever situation that you're in, there's going to be lots and lots of work to get on with. There is massive pressure on us now to get things done, to catch up on missed work, lots of missed work to cover new work. So it's Monday morning, you breeze into your classroom and you say, "Happy Monday, everyone." And then all your students are looking at you like this. Okay, so what happened there? Can you type into the chat, which I can now see, just one word that expresses how you think that your students are feeling at that moment with that kind of expression on your face? And I'm getting from your chat that you've all probably been at the receiving end of a sea of faces like this. So people say really, disgruntled, angry, annoyed, quite strong feelings coming up there. So we could tell from your responses that this is not just a common experience, but there's some real emotions behind that. And so the thing behind this is that it might not be a happy Monday for everyone at all, right? So maybe your students are feeling very unsure of themselves. They have very different things on their mind. Maybe they don't want to even be there at all. They may have even gone through all sorts of difficult situations, maybe some trauma. You don't know, you have no idea, so you can't make any assumptions. And your mind may be focused on the importance of getting the work done, but your students may not be in the best frame of mind to even take in anything that you're saying to them, let alone engage with any learning tasks that you may give them. So it's very, very important that when we're thinking about learner engagement, that we start right at the beginning. And that is the social relatedness among everyone in your class. And that's whether it's online or offline. And I can't stress enough just how important this is. So we know from research that our willingness to engage in learning is strongly affected by the social relations within the group. And that refers to 2 relationships. The first one is the relationship between you as the teacher and your students. And you can perform the most singing and dancing roadshow with all the latest technology and all the resources. If you don't have a good relationship with your students, if your students don't believe that you genuinely care about them, they are very unlikely to be willing to engage with you. And they will probably look back at you very much like Grumpy Cat that we saw earlier. The second very important aspect of social relatedness is the peer-to-peer relationship amongst the students themselves. And learners, they need to feel comfortable interacting with others in the group so that they feel happy about trying out new language, of giving and receiving feedback. And studies have shown that students who have a positive relationship with their peers, they also have high levels of engagement, motivation, and engagement. So it's very clear from the research and also from our survey findings that a positive, supportive group culture underpins all learner engagement. And there are a number of features that successful groups have in common and that then you can use to support social relatedness and therefore learner engagement. For example, successful groups have what's called a group legend. And you can support this through maybe a group name or through symbols, a class mascot, maybe a motto or a logo. And through this, you're creating a sense of belonging and trust amongst the group members. And if you can think of other ways of supporting group culture in your particular teaching context, then do feel free to share that in the chat. Okay, something else you can do to support the social emotional climate in the group then is to share something personal with your students. And this builds a relationship of trust. So I would say encourage your learners to share something appropriate with the rest of the class. So for example, you could invite them to bring in an object and talk about it for a minute. That's often called a show and tell kind of activities. And these kind of activities are really great because they also work very well online in a whole group, or you could use breakout rooms. And of course, they also work face to face. So for example, I like to travel, which you've probably guessed based on the big map of the world behind me, surrounded by postcards. Not that there's much traveling going on at the moment, but I might still show my class a postcard and I might start a discussion that way. And then postcards are a really good hook for creating a talking point. And you can even start a class collection of postcards or any picture cards that learners can bring in that they have an interest in, that they want to talk about. And this would be a great way to share something personal, which strengthens connections within the class. Second, it's also very much worth thinking about what is referred to as the 3 Rs. And the 3 Rs I mean here, the R stands for rules, roles, and routines. And it's especially important to think about rules afresh for managing the face-to-face classroom in a socially distanced way, as many of us are having to do. And so you can use this new context that we find ourselves in to involve your students in discussing those rules and why they are necessary, and that they are there to keep everybody safe, again, showing your students that you care about them. Roles are helpful for students to concentrate on a specific responsibility. So you could assign different roles to students for group work, and then they can swap roles so that they're learning different skills. For example, so that you could assign the roles of a fact checker or a summarizer or a note taker, a spokesperson, a timekeeper, and so on, all these different roles. And the last R stands for routines. So routines really help to provide structure and security. And this is especially important when things feel uncertain, as they may do now. And it helps everyone feel a little less overwhelmed. And all of these 3 Rs of rules, roles, and routines, they can be implemented very well online as well as in the face-to-face classroom. And the third action point for supporting social relatedness is to use collaborative tasks as much as possible. And using smaller groups or even just pairs, online in breakout rooms or face-to-face, this is a good way to strengthen bonds between learners. And it also teaches students collaboration skills. And this is a key life competency. And this will come in useful much beyond your language class as well. Now, one idea for the socially distanced classroom where you can't have learners moving around, you can't have them being in close proximity to each other, would be to have the whole group stay where they are, but you could single out individual learners dotted around the classroom and maybe give them a colored card each so that they know which group that they're in, and then who else, maybe 3 rows behind them, is also in that group and so on, because they'd be identified by the color of their card. And then they can do the task out loud while the rest of the class listen and make notes. And then another group with different color cards can do the same until every student has been involved. And then you can open up the whole group discussion after that. So I would like to invite you now to suggest by typing into the chat what kind of activities you think would work in your own context to strengthen teacher-student rapport and to build positive group dynamics. And while you're thinking and typing, I've put just a few examples here of activities that may do that. So number 1 represents setting up group rules, and 2 is using the Padlet tool for whole class collaboration. And you could also use this to build a class wall, and this would be helpful for representing visually a group identity. And 3 is sharing something personal in a show and tell type of activity. And these would just be a few examples of activities that strengthen the social relatedness in your class. So people are typing, yes, Quizlet, personal profile. Can see that discussion creator doing trips together. Yes, maybe in a little while, maybe you could ask students to imagine doing a trip together and write about it, do a little video about it. These are all really great suggestions that you can use in times when you can't actually do any physical travel. Okay, another key building block of learner engagement then is self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy means a belief of I can do it. And research tells us that we engage more in learning if we believe that we can be successful in the task. And for this, it is very important that the task is just challenging enough to be manageable, but still represent an achievement. And also tied in with this notion of self-efficacy is the idea of a growth mindset. And a growth mindset means a belief that improvement is possible. And it's this belief which enables learners to deal better with difficulty and with setbacks if they frame them as a challenge that can be overcome. So what do we need to do to support learner self-efficacy? Right, we need to provide plentiful opportunities for success. And you can do that by setting incremental goals at increasing level of challenge so that you give your learners the confidence that they can be successful at a task by staggering achievements. And for this, you will most likely use differentiation. And I'm aware here that often teachers' hearts sink at the mention of the word differentiation, because teachers tend to think this means extra work and they really don't have the time for any more extra work. And I understand that. But don't worry, because differentiation doesn't have to mean extra work for you. So for example, you could set a reading task where the text and the questions are getting increasingly more challenging. And then you could say to learners, okay, so we've got one text here, but the text starts off easy and then it gets harder with each paragraph. So I would like you to choose where you start. So look at paragraph 1. And if that's too easy for you, then you go to paragraph 2 and you start there. And if you're feeling even more confident, then start with paragraph 3 or 4, and so on. So you choose your own starting point. And in that way, you as a teacher, you've only had to design one single activity for the whole class. So no extra work. It saves you lots of preparation time. And so this activity builds the challenge up in incremental steps. It also offers a differentiation with no extra work. And because you're offering learners a choice, you're also supporting another key factor for engagement, which we will come to very shortly. Right, the second action point for self-efficacy is to make progress visible. Now, sometimes it's hard for learners to see how far they've come already, and you can help build their confidence by visualizing their achievements. And it's really important to celebrate small wins as well, not just the big milestones. And a few ways in which you could do this, for example, through a traffic light system of having a blue, amber, and red, or through exit tickets where learners rate their understanding of the lesson. For example, you get some free software like the assessment tool Socrative, formative assessment tool, does this very well. Or you could use student portfolios where students collect samples of their work throughout the course. And it's extremely satisfying to flick back to through all your work and to look back on what you've achieved already. It's a really good visual reminder. And this can be done on paper and displayed on class, but it can also be done online using digital tools. Last is feedback. Now, feedback is crucial to get right. And to my mind, the most important thing about feedback is that it should be encouraging for learners and it should be meaningful. And that means it's not good enough to say to learners, well done, good job, and then move on. just to be encouraging, but it's a good idea to use SMART criteria, SMART. Now, SMART, we've all heard this and probably not always loved this when it comes to our own goal setting for CPD, but I think it works extremely well for feedback. So here's a reminder that we've got to be specific in our feedback to learners. We have to set measurable and achievable goals. The feedback has to be relevant, and it's got to be delivered in a timely manner so that the window of opportunity for learning is not lost. Right, now all this task of instilling a growth mindset, an I can do it mindset in learners, that might remind you a little bit of positive psychology, focusing on encouraging self-talk and attitudes, and you would not be wrong in thinking that. But there's also a slight danger in this way of thinking, in that if you're not careful, then envisaging positive outcomes, it can feel a little bit like wishful thinking. And there's actually some research which shows that if people dream too much about achieving their goals, they actually achieve less than if they didn't do this. And that's because if in their dreams they're already there, they've already achieved their goal, then they may feel less of a drive in real life to move them, to put in the effort required to actually make things happen. So I would like to share with you a goal setting tool that I really like, and that is the WHOOP tool developed by Professor Gabrielle Oettingen. And that's from her book, Rethinking Positive Thinking. And again, you will find the full reference at the end of my slides. Now, WHOOP is an acronym, and that stands for Wish, Outcome, Obstacle, and Plan. And you can use this with your students for achieving their goals by helping them to anticipate obstacles to their learning and then identify strategies to overcome these. So for example, a student's wish could be to improve their grammar skills. And then the outcome would be they'd do well in their end of year exam. And now when it comes to the obstacle, it's a very important rule that you're only allowed to list something inside of you that is stopping you from achieving your goal. And this way of thinking does away with all the excuses that we're all in the habit of making of why something can't be done. And the idea is that once you've realized it was you who put the obstacle there in the first place, then you can also overcome it. And you can overcome it by setting a path to action with an if-then scenario. So an example for myself would be, I also get easily distracted by alerts coming up on my phone. And two of my favorite phone apps that can really set my attention are Twitter and Instagram. So I've made a rule for myself that if I'm working, then I will leave my phone in another room. And maybe you can also think of some ways in which you can use the WHOOP tool with your students to help them not just to set, but also to achieve their goals. And like me, then you may find that it also works for yourself and your own goals. Right, next up, I have a question for you, and I'm giving you a choice now of what you would like to do next. And the choice is, what do you want to do next? The choice is green or blue. And we've got a little poll prepared for you now. And Eve, if I can ask you to start the poll. Now I have to apologize. If you're watching on Facebook Live, then I don't think you can see the poll. So instead, just type in the word green or blue into the chat. You can do that as well, and I'll keep an eye for that. So the choice of what we want to do next is green or blue. And I'm just going to count down from 5, and then Eve's going to close the poll, and I'm going to share the result with you. So we go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And Eve, if you could close the poll. And I can tell you, looking at the chat and also at the poll, that 61% of you voted for green. Okay, so thank you very much. That was the end of our little poll. So the majority voted for green. And so this brings us to the next building block of learner engagement then, which is agency. And research into agency tells us that we learn better when we can control aspects of what, when, and how we learn. And this is what I was referring to just a moment ago when I talked about the activity using differentiation, where learners could choose their own starting level. And maybe take a moment to notice how you were feeling just then when I offered you a choice. So you were exercising your agency and you didn't even know really what it was about, what the choice was about, but you still participated. And so have a think how that made you feel, and how you can use that to empower your learners in that way. So in your teaching, wherever possible, provide opportunities for choice and voice. And I really like this phrase because it expresses in a very clear way what we should try and build into our teaching. But too much choice can feel overwhelming. So to avoid making choices too overwhelming, it's a good idea to keep them contained within a structure. And an example of that might be that for a writing task, you could offer students two options. So for example, they could write A, a formal letter, or B, an informal text message, but they would both these forms of writing would express the same content. Or you could keep the format the same and offer a choice on the content. So for example, the task could be to write a blog post to persuade readers to donate to charity, but you could let students choose a charity that they would want people to support. And the second point to support learner agency says that we want to foster a culture of learner-centered learning. And for this, project-based learning is ideal. And that's because projects put learners in an active role and allow them to make decisions. And if you're involved in a project and you have a very specific role and very tangible outcomes, like acting in a play, for example, you can't just sit there and let things wash over you. You just have to participate. You have to engage through the very nature of the task. And last, think of yourself as a coach rather than as a teacher. Now, this is a bit of a mental shift in how we often traditionally think of ourselves as teachers. But it might be helpful to think about that if we want to think of the learner as at the center of their learning, then this means that we as the teacher, we can't be in the center. We have to move a little bit away from center stage to make room for the learner, right? And so for us, it's to support the learner from the sidelines, more like a coach. And in the classroom, this means not just focusing on our students' language achievement, but also on their psychological state and teaching them more general strategies and skills. So now I have a little task for you, and I want to show you a reading text, and that's the text here on the yellow background. Now, there is no need to actually read the whole text. If you can't quite make that out on the screen that you're watching, then don't worry about that. It is really just to give you an idea of the kind of source text that might typically be used in ELT. Of course, it's very much dependent on the age group and the level that you're teaching. And I would like to invite you now to have a think of some ways in which you could use a text like this in your own teaching in a way that supports learner agency. And I've put a little reminder on the side here, what aspects you could think about for doing this, which are choice and voice, project-based learning, and teaching learning to learn skills. So feel free to type into the chat box your idea of how you could use this reading text or a text like it to increase learner engagement through supporting aspects of learner agency. Okay, so I can see people typing jigsaw reading. That's a really good idea. Yeah, who reads what? Scanning a text for new words. Yes, more of a language focus. Role play from the text, changing the format. Yeah, that's a very good idea. So some excellent ideas coming up there from everybody. And so for choice and voice, you can see that the paragraphs here are numbered, and I really love numbering paragraphs. And like in the example that I used for self-efficacy earlier, to give learners a choice which paragraph that they like to choose. This text here is not structured in increasing difficulty, but you could still give learners a choice within a structure in this way. And you could also offer a choice of tasks. And so for offering a choice, you could design a choice board like this one here. And it's like a noughts and crosses, or sometimes also called a tic-tac-toe style board. And you can put a task in each box, and then learners can choose a task from each row. So again, it offers a choice, but within a structure. And for the middle box, you see there's a star in the middle box, and you could ask learners to come up with an idea for a task themselves. And this would be an opportunity for your learners to express their voice and also make a meaningful contribution to the learning process. And another idea for voice is that you could offer your learners the opportunity to express their opinions as part of the learning tasks, exploiting your source text. Now, people are typing about project-based learning. That's a really good idea. So you could use this text and build it into a larger project where groups of learners can choose their own focus. So it could be, for example, around multinational companies, around marketing, around environmental concerns. It could also be a language focus, such as giving instructions using the example of putting up flat pack furniture, that kind of thing. All of this is rooted in a real life situation, and that's usually at the heart of project-based learning. And for learning to learn, one way in which you could address this is to teach students decoding strategies. So to pay attention to clues from the title, people already pointed that out, from the images, to work out meaning based on the adjoining words, using the context, using the co-text of words, and also to use their knowledge of their first language or from other languages. And all of this is providing them with a repertoire of strategies that they can use to exercise their agency so that they can make choices which will engage them more fully. Okay, so we were talking about real life situations being at the heart of project-based learning. And this brings us to the next building block of engagement, which is relevance. And the research insight here is that we are so much more motivated to engage when we feel that what we're learning is relevant to our personal lives. And this means that it's very important that we design, or at the very least adapt, tasks for the learners that we're currently teaching. And don't worry, this does not mean reinventing the wheel every time we start teaching a new group. Sometimes it can just mean making a very small but effective tweak to our existing materials. And one technique that has worked very well for me in the past is that when you're planning a lesson, then focus on just one or two particular students in your group when you're planning it in your head. So think about them like that. And then in planning the next lesson, focus on a different subgroup or a different learner. And if you do it like that, then it will make your planning more specific, and it will strengthen the link between the materials and between the learners. And some helpful questions to guide you in your lesson planning are: what do learners need to learn? What are their current abilities? What do they like to do? And of course, offering a variety is always a good idea from an engagement point of view. And what are their goals? Now, goals are different from what they need and what they like, because goals are all about learner beliefs. And last, what are learners' real lives like? And we always need to consider the social context of our learners, and we need to be sensitive around how we use language and lesson content and be realistic in our outlook as well. Next is explain the value, purpose, and meaning in a task. And we know from research that learners really need to see the value in a task in order to engage with it fully. So it's a good idea to make it explicit for them, or better still, to get your students to work out what they think the value of the task is. Have your students ever said to you, why are we doing this? Type yes if they've ever asked you that. Well, they've certainly asked me that. And so if you're saying no, then you're doing well. But there's, again, a lot of yeses coming up. So it's, again, a very common experience. So think of yourself. It's very important to know why we're doing something, isn't it? Otherwise, we wouldn't be particularly motivated to do anything. And the fact that someone is making you do something without you understanding the rationale for it is really not good enough, because for sustainable engagement, and certainly this is the case for older children and for adults, we need to go beyond the compliance phase. Okay, last is to offer opportunities to personalize activities wherever possible. And we already said that sharing appropriate personal details is a very bonding thing to do. So if you have a task about talking about other people, for example, then let learners choose who they want to talk about. For example, a famous person that they admire, or someone they know that they admire. So I really like the British TV personality and chef Nadia Hussein. So I might start off by showing a picture of Nadia Hussein. So I'm going to use one of her cookbooks here with a picture on it, and I would model the expected outcome for my learners using a genuine, personal, real-life example that is authentic, and then learners can do the same, and rather than describe a generic photo or a stock image of a person from a textbook. Okay, right. So at the beginning of my talk, I told you that I would be dropping in some small factual details about myself all through this talk. And so now I'm asking you, just type in the chat box, what you have learned about me so far. And I can tell you that there were 5 facts about me that I casually slipped into my talk. And people are typing. Yes, I like travel. Yes, correct. I hate Mondays, not necessarily, just if just in certain circumstances. Yes, I live in the UK, like Nadia Hussein. Like, yes, very good. Okay, so that shows that you paid attention to these snippets of information that I dropped in during my talk. And here's another question for you, though. Would you have noticed or remembered any of this if I hadn't told you to listen out for this? And my guess is you probably wouldn't, or maybe not as much. So what I did there was that I activated your sense of curiosity. And we know from research that curiosity is an important condition for learning, and this can be triggered in response to uncertainty. So these little facts about me, they would be new information for you, and also importantly, you never knew when the next one would happen. So there is some unpredictability around this, and we know from neuroscience that unpredictable rewards or stimuli are highly engaging. In fact, they're irresistible, and in fact, much of the sometimes addictive power of gaming is based on this very concept. So you could do something similar in your lesson. You could tell learners that you're going to mention 5 names of animals at random intervals, and learners could write them down or tick them off a card or hold something up. Or if you're doing asynchronous teaching, then they could write down the time of when you mentioned that, or when something appeared. There are all sorts of possibilities for this kind of task, or this kind of idea to work online or offline. So this was all about random rewards, but it's also much more satisfying for us to discover something for ourselves rather than to be just presented with the information. So for example, if you think of 2 presents that you might receive, and one is wrapped and one is unwrapped, which one is the more exciting one, the wrapped one or the unwrapped one? So in the same way, letting learners to find out about things for themselves is much more engaging than just presenting them with the information, because there's always the danger they can just switch off. And you can use this for topic content, but also for working out the rules of language. And so the discovery or the inductive approach for learning, where learners work out something for themselves based on examples and scaffolded guidance, is very popular for that reason. Second, we all have an inbuilt urge to find out how things work, and that's sometimes called the mental itch. So you can create a mental itch that your students will want to scratch, and you can do this by using elements of surprise or mystery. And we're all familiar with highly effective attention-grabbing strategies like cliffhangers in advertising, in the media, in films and books. We know that this works. And so one way of using this in your teaching would be to end on a cliffhanger and get learners to speculate about what happened next. And this is related to the last point, which is use the power of stories. And again, as humans, we're all naturally attracted to a good story, not just that we want to find out what happens, but also that we remember information more effectively when it's structured in a narrative format, because this is a format that's very familiar to us, and we instinctively relate to it well. And stories appeal not just to younger learners when they are used more commonly, but really you can use them with learners of any age. And I would like to encourage you to do that. And that's stories as input for teaching. But don't forget, we can also set creative tasks where learners are the storytellers. And that works with old school pen and paper, of course, but there are also some really lovely digital tools as well. And here are a few on the board that I've brought up for you there. That's Storybird, Storyboard, My Story, and I'm sure you know some others as well. And people are sharing some other ones in the chat as well. Thank you very much for doing that. Okay, and my last point is, don't forget to enjoy yourself. And this is official advice, because we know from research that we are much more motivated to engage in learning tasks which we enjoy. So especially in language teaching, do foster positive emotions, do capture what is called FLE, foreign language enjoyment, because enjoyment is positively correlated with achievement. And this means we enjoy what we're good at, and we're good at what we enjoy. So this is a win-win. So do draw on humor, on getting learners active, on using visuals, music. Again, you know your learners best, so you can design tasks around what you both enjoy and what suits your context and the age group that you're teaching. Now, please don't be worried that if you're laughing with your class, that the message is that the lesson isn't serious or that it is not important. That's not the case at all, because we do take learning very, very seriously. But this doesn't mean that we have to take ourselves seriously. And this can be done in a very authentic and light-hearted way. For example, if something amusing has happened to you in your own life that may be appropriate to share with your students, then you could just try out doing that and see how that goes. And you could also ask students to share something funny with you in return. You could do that in the target language, and everybody's happy. You could try out and see how that goes. And I wonder if anyone's ever tried that. If so, just share it with us in the chat. So do use activities that you and your learners can enjoy together. Have some fun together. So your students seeing you enjoy enjoying teaching them and sharing a laugh with them, this will help a lot for them to connect with you on a human level. And it will again build social connections and trust. And it's this social relatedness, which we've seen at the beginning, which you all know also as practicing teachers, is the underpinning of all successful learner engagement. And from this stem the other building blocks of engagement, which we talked about, which are self-efficacy, agency, relevance, curiosity, and enjoyment. And if you address these building blocks in your teaching, then any activities based on them will be engaging for your students now and for the future. So hopefully this talk will have given you some ideas for tasks that are engaging for learners, but most importantly also a sense of the bigger picture of the foundations that these kind of tasks are built on and why it matters. Thank you very much. Now you can download your certificate from this slide here, and I've also listed a reminder of the 6 building blocks of engagement, and also you can find here the reference list of the publications that I mentioned during the talk. And I believe we have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you, Heike. We have about 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
But you're in such good flow, so we just...
Sorry, I got carried away.
So I'm just going to throw one at you very, very quickly.
Okay.
We had a question from Facebook, actually,
Okay.
which was about what can I do if I'm working on a topic and I really have no ideas for a game or something, and students are asking for one. I don't know if that happens only to me. That's what that person said. So if you could give us a very quick 1 minute answer.
Okay, so students are asking for a game, and you can't think about. You can't think of one. Well, I would ask students what kind of game they enjoy, and I would also sort of slightly question here that it shouldn't really start with the game. Students ask for a game, but it should really start with what you want to teach, so that that's always that should always be your main priority. So ask students to suggest a game. I mean, something that works very quickly is something like noughts and crosses. Yeah, something like that. Guess 20 questions. Think of something people could ask. It very much depends on the level. I mean, primary games where you maybe throw some soft bags around the classroom, the next person has to catch this. It's very different from if you're teaching business English. So that's a bit difficult to say. So you know your learners best, and if you don't, then I would ask them. And don't think as a teacher, oh, I've got so much pressure on me, I have to be this all singing or dancing roadshow and have loads of ideas all the time. No, ask your learners what they want to do. You ask for a game. What game do you want?
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, which is such a shame. But thank you so much, Heike. It's been absolutely fantastic, and you've had so many positive comments on the chat.